Welcome to our deep dive. It often feels like we're drowning in information, but getting stuff that's actually useful, that's the challenge.
It really is. And today we're focusing on one specific tool for that, the survey.
Right. Surveys. They seem simple, don't they? Just ask questions.
Deceptively simple. Designing one that gives you solid, trustworthy data, that's actually, well, pretty complex.
Totally. Anyone who's tried to gather info, or even just make sense of poll results, knows it's tricky. So today, we're digging into the core principles. We're pulling from lecture notes and a video by Associate Professor Jae Choi at George Washington University.
Yeah, the goal is to unpack the nuts and bolts. How are surveys built? How do you run them? How do you make sense of the answers?
And crucially, why getting it right matters so much.
It's that classic saying, right? Garbage in, garbage out. If your survey design is flawed, the data you get is flawed. Doesn't matter how fancy your analysis is after the fact.
That's the heart of it. The quality of what you put in dictates the quality of what you get out. Research validity really hinges on good data collection, and surveys are often a huge part of that.
Exactly. You could have the best statistical model, but feed it bad data from a poorly designed survey. Your results are going to be misleading. Simple as that.
Okay, so let's start right at the beginning. What exactly is a survey, fundamentally?
Well, the sources make an important distinction. A survey is a data collection method. It's not, strictly speaking, a research design.
Ah, okay. So it's a tool you can use within different designs.
Precisely. It's very common in non-experimental research, measuring attitudes or opinions without any kind of intervention. That's what people often picture.
Right, like a public opinion poll.
Exactly. But you can absolutely use surveys in experimental designs too. Think about testing a new teaching method.
Oh?
You might give students a survey before the new method starts. That's your pre-test. Then they go through the program, and you give them the same survey after the post-test.
Ah, I see. So you're measuring the change using the survey method, but the overall design is experimental because you manipulated something, the teaching method.
You got it. So the method's flexible, but
Yeah.
the quality issue, that always applies. The quality of the assessment, the survey itself, is critical.
Okay, so how do you make a high-quality survey? Where do you start?
It all boils down to the individual questions, the items. That's the foundation. Getting those right is just paramount.
Right. So what are the golden rules for rating good questions?
First up, every single item has to link directly back to your research problem or your hypotheses.
No tangents just because they seem interesting.
None. Irrelevant questions just add noise, confuse people, and can even bias the results. Keep it focused.
Makes sense. What else?
Clarity, absolute clarity. Questions need to be unambiguous, and critically, they should only address one single concept at a time.
Ah, the double-barreled question trap.
Exactly, like asking, are you satisfied with your pay and your working conditions? Maybe you love the pay but hate the conditions, or vice versa. How do you answer that?
You can't, really. Not accurately.
Right, and that introduces measurement error. It tanks your reliability because you don't know what part of the question people are actually responding to.
Okay, clear, single focus. Avoid leading questions too, I assume.
Oh, definitely. You can't phrase things in a way that subtly pushes people towards a certain answer. Like, don't you agree that this new policy is a huge success?
Yeah, that's pretty blatant. What about social desirability?
Huge factor. That's the tendency for people to answer in ways that make them look good or fit in with social norms rather than being totally honest.
So asking about, say, exercise habits or charitable donations, people might inflate things.
Precisely. They might overreport the good stuff and underreport the bad, which ties into the next point. Be careful with overly personal or sensitive topics.
Like income or very personal relationship.
Exactly. Unless it's absolutely essential and you've built trust or guaranteed anonymity, those questions often get skipped. High item non-response.
Which means you get no data for that question anyway.
Right. Also, keep items short and simple. Long, complicated questions are mentally taxing.
People tune out or misunderstand.
Both. They're more likely to misinterpret, skip it, or just give a quick, possibly careless answer to move on. Short, clear, easy to process.
Got it. And the answer choices.
Response options need to be exhaustive. They have to cover all the likely possibilities, and mutually exclusive if it's that kind of question, like age ranges shouldn't overlap.
Makes sense.
And a basic writing rule, but crucial here, avoid double negatives. Do you disagree that we should not ban parking? My brain hurts just thinking about it.
Oh, yeah, keep it straightforward. Okay, so you've drafted your questions following these rules. What about the format? How do you actually present them?
The sources talk about two main formats, selected response or forced choice, and open-ended.
Selected response is like multiple choice. Or rating scales.
Exactly. Multiple choice, checkboxes, or scales like the Likert type items, strongly disagree to strongly agree.
Those are everywhere, usually 4, 5, or 7 points,
Yeah, those are common scales. The other type is open-ended.
where people write in their own answer.
Correct, in their own words.
That sounds much harder to analyze. Why use them?
They are definitely harder to quantify, no doubt, but they're incredibly valuable, especially early on, or for getting deeper qualitative insights.
How so?
Well, if you're exploring a new topic, maybe you run a small preliminary study with open-ended questions. It helps you see how people talk about the issue, the language they use, the range of opinions out there.
Ah, so it helps you write better multiple choice options later.
Exactly. You can use those insights to craft more relevant and comprehensive selected response items for your main survey. It's great for exploration and refinement.
Okay, that makes sense. So, questions drafted, format chosen. Before you launch it properly, there's a crucial step, right?
Absolutely non-negotiable. The pilot test. You have to try out your questionnaire with a small group from your actual target population.
This isn't just proofreading for typos.
Oh no, much more than that. It's about seeing how real people interact with it. Do they understand the questions? Do they find some too sensitive? Are the response options working? Does it take too long?
So you catch the problems before they mess up your main study.
Precisely. Find the kinks in a small group first. Now, the sources do note pilot tests can be, well, expensive sometimes, especially for really complex assessment.
How to get other issues.
Yeah, like if you pilot test on the exact people you plan to survey later and it's too close in time, they might remember the questions or their answers. Memory effects, that could skew the real survey results.
Tricky balance. Okay, so design, format, pilot, kinks hopefully ironed out, you send it out. But getting people to actually do it, that's another battle.
It really is response rate. That's the percentage of people who actually complete and return the whole thing.
And what's considered good?
Well, the literature often cites like 70% as a good target, but the reality, especially for general public surveys, it's often way lower, sometimes below 50%.
Wow. Okay. That's sobering. It's not just if they respond, but how completely.
Right, that's response quality. Did they actually finish it? Did they skip sections? A few random missed questions might be okay.
But patterns are bad.
Very bad. If everyone skips the same block of questions or people drop off halfway through, that signals a problem. Systematic incompleteness.
So how do you boost those response rates and improve quality? Any tricks of the trade?
Definitely strategies. Looks matter. A professional-looking cover letter, a clean layout, good branding, it signals legitimacy.
Makes it seem important.
Yeah. And incentives often work. Even a small gratuity or entry into a prize draw can make a difference.
Money talks, or at least a chance at money talk.
It helps. Being upfront about how long it will take and giving a clear deadline also helps people plan.
Respecting their time.
Exactly. And think about when you send it. Don't hit people during major holidays or, tax season if you're asking financial questions. Avoid their busiest times.
Like sending surveys to teachers during finals week. Bad idea.
Terrible idea.
Yeah.
And finally, plan for follow-ups. Reminders.
The nudge.
Right. Automated emails or texts are great now. But you have to find that sweet spot between reminding and, well, becoming annoying spam.
Yeah. Fine line. But even with all that, some people just won't respond, especially to sensitive stuff. And that's not just inconvenient. It's a real problem for the data, right?
It's one of the biggest headaches in survey research. The absolute key thing to remember is you cannot just assume the people who didn't respond are the same as those who did.
Why is that assumption so dangerous?
Because if the non-responders are systematically different, your results are biased. It's called non-response bias.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Imagine you're surveying people about their income. If people with very low incomes or maybe very high incomes are less likely to answer that question, the average income you calculate from your responses won't reflect the true average of the population. It'll be skewed.
Okay, the sample you get isn't representative of the group you wanted to study.
Exactly. Or think about relationship satisfaction surveys. Maybe people in really unhappy relationships are less likely to want to fill out a survey about it. Your results would look overly positive.
So how do you even figure out if you have that bias?
It's tough, but you can try. If you have some demographic info on everyone you invited, compare the responders to the non-responders on things like age, gender, location. Are there patterns?
Frequency is missing?
Yeah. And look at item non-response, too. Are certain types of people skipping certain questions? That gives clues. A harder but sometimes necessary step is to try and contact a small sample of the non-respondents and just ask why they didn't participate.
Find out the reasons.
Was it bad timing? Too sensitive? Too long? Technical issues, understanding the why helps you gauge the potential bias. You can't just ignore it and hope it's random.
Okay, so that's non-response. What about people who do respond but maybe skip questions or aren't entirely honest?
Right. Incomplete responses, we touched on that. Random skips aren't ideal. But systematic patterns like lots of missing data at the end or specific items always skipped are red flags.
And dishonesty. The sources seem pretty strong on that.
They were. There was that line, torturing is worse than no response.
Wow, strong words. Why is dishonest data worse than missing data?
Because missing data is an unknown. You know you don't have the information. Dishonest data is actively misleading. It puts wrong information into your data set, which can distort your findings in ways that are really hard to spot.
So how do you spot it?
Look for impossible answers, someone claiming they're 200 years old. Look for implausible patterns, someone saying they watch 20 hours of TV and read 20 books every day. Unlikely combinations. The sources also mentioned an honesty item, maybe some kind of internal consistency check, though they didn't detail it.
And there's that specific type of, maybe not outright lying, but biased responding. Acquiescence.
Yes, acquiescence bias. It's the tendency, especially on rating scales, for people to just kind of agree with statements or pick the neutral or positive options.
Just checking agree or neutral down the list.
Pretty much. Maybe because disagreeing feels confrontational or it takes more thought. Whatever the reason, if people do that, it washes out real differences and often makes results look more positive or middle of the road than they actually are.
Okay, so dealing with all this. Non-response, missing items, potential dishonesty. You've collected your data, warts and all. What do you do with the gaps?
First step is always assessment. How much data is missing, overall, per item? The sources mention a rough benchmark, maybe 5–10% missing might be considered acceptable, but it really depends.
And then you have choices for handling it. Deletion or imputation.
Broadly, yes. Deletion is just removing data. List-wise, deletion is the harshest. If a person is missing anything relevant to your analysis, you throw out their entire response for that analysis.
Ouch. That could shrink your sample fast.
It really can. Pairwise deletion is less brutal. You only exclude the specific missing value for calculations involving that variable. You keep the rest of their data for other calculations.
Okay, that sounds a bit better. What about imputation? Filling in the blanks.
Right. Imputation uses statistical methods to estimate plausible values for the missing data points. It can be simple, like replacing missing values with the average score for that question.
More complex.
Much more complex. Things like multiple imputation use algorithms to predict missing values based on the patterns and relationships seen in the data the person did provide and across other respondents.
Sounds powerful. Maybe a bit like magic.
It can feel that way. But it's not magic, it's estimation based on assumptions. And that's the key point. Statistical software makes imputation seem easy. Just click a button.
Yeah.
But you really need to understand why the data is missing before you impute. Is it random? Or is it related to income or gender or how they answered other questions? Just blindly imputing without understanding the pattern of missingness can create its own biases. Analyze the missingness first.
Understand the why before the how. Crucial. Okay, shifting slightly, we've talked general principles, but so much happens online now. SurveyMonkey, Google Forms, how does that change things?
Yes, massively. Online surveys have huge advantages. Speed is incredible. Convenience for respondents. You can reach people anywhere, collect data really fast.
Sounds great. Any downsides?
Well, sometimes legitimacy can be a question. Is this real research or just spam? And there used to be big concerns about the digital divide, people not having access. That's less of an issue now in many places, but still a consideration depending on your population.
Does the data quality differ? Online versus paper?
Studies have shown mixed results, actually. Sometimes it seems the respondents' engagement with the topic matters more than whether it's on screen or paper.
What do you need to keep in mind for online surveys?
You need to be confident your target group has reliable internet and email access. It often works best for specific populations, like maybe university students via a listserv. Keep the access super simple, just a link to click, and yes, you still need those automated follow-up reminders.
Okay. Now, what about stepping away from questionnaires people fill out themselves? Interviews. That's a different beast.
Totally different. Interviews, face-to-face, phone, maybe video call, now have their own strengths. They can often boost response rates because it's more engaging.
More personal connection.
Maybe. And crucially, they allow for clarification. If someone gives a vague answer, the interviewer can gently probe. Could you tell me a bit more about that? You can't do that easily on a static questionnaire.
Allows for richer detail.
Exactly. You can also standardize the process through good interviewer training and potentially include people who might struggle with written surveys. We see interviews used in huge, important studies.
Are the questions different in an interview?
They can be. You might use more open-ended questions designed to elicit interpretation or stories, like tell me about your experience with, but the core principles still apply. The questions themselves still need to be clear and unambiguous.
And the interviewer's role is obviously huge.
Absolutely critical. They need rigorous training, so they ask questions consistently, probe neutrally, and don't influence the answers. The sources mention a friendly but business-like approach, build rapport, but stay professional and on task. And recording answers needs to be smooth, not distracting.
What about telephone interviews specifically?
They're a common type. Often cheaper than face-to-face, obviously no travel time, easier to reach people geographically dispersed. Data can be entered directly into a system, can feel a bit less intimidating for some topics than someone sitting in your living room.
But there must be downsides too.
Oh yeah, people get tired faster on the phone. It's less flexible, harder to use visual aids or build deep rapport. Probably less suited for really sensitive or complex, controversial stuff. You lose all the nonverbal cues too.
Right. So every method paper, online interview has its pros and cons, and all are vulnerable to error. Let's loop back to that.
Right. Error. Two main kinds. Bias, which is systematic error. It consistently pushes your results off target, like that faulty scale always adding 5 pounds.
Skews the average.
Exactly. And then there's unsystematic or random error. This affects precision or reliability. Your measurements might bounce around a bit randomly each time, making them less consistent, but it doesn't systematically distort the overall picture, like the scale that jitters slightly.
So bias makes you wrong, random error makes you fuzzy.
Good way to put it. A big source of error is the response effect, the respondent giving inaccurate answers due to misunderstanding, fatigue, social desirability, whatever. Interviewers need training to spot this, and inconsistency in how interviewers conduct the interview introduces random error. Good design and good procedures aim to minimize both bias and random error. Get accurate and precise data, avoid that garbage in.
It's so clear how much meticulous work goes into just getting decent raw data. Looking forward, though, the sources hinted at some pretty wild changes coming in assessment.
Yeah, this is where things get really interesting, and the landscape is shifting fast. The old lines between methods mail, email, online form, phone call, video chat, they're all blurring because of technology.
And we're moving beyond just asking questions and getting answers.
Way beyond. Think about it. Traditional surveys rely on reading, selecting, maybe writing. Digital tools let us capture totally different kinds of data as people respond or interact.
Like what?
Like physiological data, eye tracking to see what parts of a web page or question grab attention, heart rate variability to gauge emotional response or cognitive load.
Wow.
Video analysis using AI can automatically code facial expressions. Are they smiling, frowning, looking confused? Audio analysis can pick up tone of voice, turn-taking patterns in a discussion, maybe even identify dominant speakers.
So you're getting data on subconscious reactions, not just self-reported feelings.
Potentially, yes. Plus, AI could power automated interviews, generate tailored questions on the fly, adaptive testing based on previous answers.
Customizing the assessment in real time.
Exactly. And virtual reality. Imagine simulating a complex social situation or a workplace scenario and observing how someone actually behaves in that simulation, not just asking them what they think they would do.
That's a huge leap from asking, how would you handle X, to actually watching them handle simulated X.
It is. Now, qualitative analysis, making sense of text, interviews, observations, that's still absolutely crucial. These new methods add layers. They don't necessarily replace everything. But the challenge now is to be creative. How do we use these new digital tools and data streams smartly to get meaningful insights? And not just cling to 20th century methods.
That's a lot to think about.
That's
A whole new world of data collection possibilities and responsibilities, I imagine.
definitely raises some big questions.
Well, building right on that, with all these incredible technological advancements, the ability to collect biometric data, track behavior, analyze interactions in such detail. What do you think are the biggest ethical considerations we really need to wrestle with as we design surveys and assessments in the future?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? As the data gets richer and potentially more intrusive, the ethical lines get much harder to draw.
Things like informed consent,
Hmm.
data privacy, the potential for misuse of this incredibly detailed personal information. It feels like a minefield.
It's a critical conversation we need to be having constantly.
Well, this has been a really thorough journey through the world of survey design, from writing that perfect question to battling non-response, dealing with messy data, and now looking at this, quite frankly, mind-bending future.
And the core message, hopefully, is clear. No matter how simple or complex your method, good design is everything. It's the foundation for getting quality data. And without quality data, your insights aren't really insights at all.
A really vital reminder. The craft matters, regardless of the tools. We hope this deep dive gives you, our listeners, a new lens for looking at surveys you encounter, or maybe some food for thought if you're involved in creating them.
And definitely mull over that ethical question. It's only going to become more relevant.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning.